welcome to another edition of the Traction Reaction Podcast. I'm Steve Zotke, and very happy to announce it is Brian Redman joining us. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Steve. Happy to be here.
Pretty neat. We've chatted, of course, many times, especially up at Road America and whatnot. But you have an event coming up in Chattanooga in October, and this is a pretty neat deal. It's been kind of gaining momentum. This is the second annual one, and of course, it's the Chattanooga Motorcar.com is where the information is, but it's the Chattanooga Motorcar Festival, which is going to be held October 15th through 17th. And tell us a bit about that.
Yep, well, it's Byron DeFore, who is a leading businessman in Chattanooga and probably in the whole of Tennessee. He's extraordinarily energetic and always coming up with new ideas. And so 2 years ago, in 2019, he started the Chattanooga Motorcar Festival for the first time. And that was a sprint, for cars down by the river, a beautiful Concours d'Elegance, and really incredible media coverage in terms of audio-visual, giant, outdoor stages and screens. And it was surprisingly successful and good for the first time, doing an event of that type. Well, just to make it jump up a little bit, this year he's holding a race meeting. So it's no more sprinting one car at a time. This is a car-on-car race meeting on a specially built track that goes through partly a commercial zone and partly on the city streets. And in addition to that, of course, the Concours d'Elegance, a rally, and a Mecum auction for 600 cars, all the same weekend.
Wow, that sounds like if you're a car person, it's the place to go. And the Mecum auctions, of course, those have been gaining a lot of momentum over the last few years. They're on TV, and of course, they were out in Monterey this weekend, as pretty much everybody else was. And for a car person, you can go watch some vintage cars and maybe perhaps even buy one too.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Well, it'll be a fantastic weekend, all in downtown Chattanooga, basically.
Yeah, Chattanooga, it's a beautiful, beautiful area of the United States. And of course, Ken Gross is the concours chairman, award-winning author and writer. And then the Grand Marshal is Corky Coker, who's, of course, anybody who's been around racing, like you especially, can maybe give us mention something about Corky and Ken Gross.
Yes, well, of course, I've known Ken for a long, long time, mostly through these type of events. The Concours d'Elegance at Amelia Island every March. It's now like the 25 years that they've been doing it there. And so I've known Ken for probably 25 or 30 years. He does a great job. And Corky Coker, the Grand Marshal this year, is again a local Chattanooga businessman, extremely successful, and he made the Coker tires, which were primarily for the earlier race cars. And in fact, he's got a fantastic museum of his cars and older cars down again in downtown Chattanooga, which is open to the public, and though it's another must-see place. He does a wonderful job.
Yeah, and of course, last month up at Road America for the Brian Redman WeatherTech Challenge. That's been going on for many years. And what was your opinion on how well that event went?
Well, it went extremely well, considering all the COVID problems and this and that and the other. It was really fantastic. The weather was perfect. The entry was 430 race cars. There were no serious incidents. Yeah, there was some banging together, normal stuff, but nobody was hurt. And it was a really fantastic weekend. A big crowd. The store there where they sell all the memorabilia was packed, jam-packed tight all weekend. So I love Road America. It's a great, great place. And I'm hoping I get invited back again next year.
Of course, your book, Brian Redman, through Avro Publishing, how's that been going?
Well, it was published, first of all, in 2016. And it was a friend of mine, a fellow racer and a very big businessman, Jim Mullen, who had the idea to do it. And in 2016, it was the Royal Automobile Club Motoring Book of the Year. And I went to London to the Royal Automobile Club there, and we had a dinner with 130 people who'd all bought a copy of the book. And the book's done extremely well. I mean, it's now in its fourth printing, and we've actually sold about 8,000. which for a small niche type of book is okay. It's pretty good. But funnily enough, just this week, I mean, it's unbelievable, really. I got an email from Jim Mullen, my co-author, and he'd had a message from a local Boston paper because about 2 years ago, Jim put on a Porsche and BMW luncheon that I sold a lot of books at. And, you know, to promote that, he put a small article in a Boston paper with 3 photographs from the book. Well, this week, we all get a message from a publishing company that we used a photograph that was their property, and they're going to sue us for damages. This photograph was taken 51 years ago, and now they're coming after us for more money because we showed this. Unbelievable, actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's incredible stuff. In fact, let's go step back and into your career. And I first met you 20 some years ago at a luncheon with the old Rust Lake Racing Banquet. It was you and I and David Hobbs and a few other people. It's one of my favorite stories. There's actually 2 of them, but the first one I want you to tell us about is how you got introduced to the Porsche 917.
Well, very briefly, I'd started racing in 1959, racing a Morris Minor traveler's car, estate car, Woody, and to use the American expression. But in 67, a friend of mine said, "Do you want to turn professional?" I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "It means I'll pay you 30 quid a week, 30 pounds a week, about $50, guaranteed for a year with a car and a mechanic." And that's how I turned professional in 67. But at the end of 67, I was doing a race in Paris, the Paris 1,000 kilometers, and Montlhéry, driving a Ferrari 250 LM with Richard Atwood. And after the race, it was very wet and we did okay. And this tall, rather distinguished looking gentleman came up to me and introduced himself. He said, "Brian, I'm David York, the team manager for John Wyer Automotive Engineering." Well, John Wyer was the best long distance team in the world at that time with the GT40. And he said, "Would you like to drive with Ix at the Kyle Army 9 hours in November?" This is like a month away. And Ix and I won the race, the 9 hours. And I signed a contract that day with John Wyer for 1968. Then I get asked by the Cooper Car Company to do Formula One. So now I'm doing Formula One and the best long distance drive in the world. And with Ix, we won the Brands Hatch 6 hours and the Spa 1,000 kilometer race in Spa-Francorchamps. And I finished 3rd in my second Formula One race for Cooper at the Spanish Grand Prix. And the next race, the Belgian Grand Prix, back at Spa-Francorchamps, where we just won the 1,000 kilometers, the suspension broke on the 7th lap. I had an enormous accident. I went over the barrier, and this arm was trapped between the car and the barrier. I had a very bad compound fracture of the right forearm. 3 wheels came off the car. It was a scene from hell. It all caught fire as well. So when the head of surgery at the University of Liège Teaching Hospital got me on the table, he said, "Monsieur Redman, it may not be possible to save your arm." I laughed. I said, "Thank you, Professor." He says, "Why are you smiling?" I said, "Because I'm here." So several months later, November, Porsche asked if I'd sign a contract for 69, which I did. My arm was hurting. It hadn't united. I had to have it all redone again in Johannesburg 6 weeks before the first race at Daytona with Porsche. But Joe Siffert and I drove, 5 races that year. We won 5 of the 10 races, and we won the Manufacturers' Championship for Porsche for the first time. So also coming in the background was the 917. Because of a rule change, Porsche were going to build 25 5-litre. Actually, there were 4.5 litres. But the drivers, there were 10 drivers at that time. There were 6 Germans, 3 English, Richard Atwood, Vic Elford and myself, and 1 Swiss, my co-driver, the great Joe Siffert. So I get a call from Porsche in March of 1969 saying, "Herr Redman, you will come to Weissach and test the new 917. And I thought, I live hundreds of miles away in the north of England, and there's 6 German heroes ready to die for the fatherland near Stuttgart. Why do they want me? So I said, "I'll call Joseph, let me make some arrangements. So please be sure to call us, Aaron." I said, I will. So I called my partner, Joe Siffert, in Switzerland, in Freiburg, and I said, Seppi, have you tested the new 917 yet? There's a long silence. He says, no, Brian, he said, we let the others find out what breaks first. So I was unavoidably detained. I couldn't go.
That's a great story. Talking to Brian Redman, of course, and make sure you check out Chattanooga Motorcar.com for the Chattanooga Motorcar Festival. It's going to be held, the second annual Motorcar Festival. It's going to be held October 15th through the 17th at Chattanooga, Tennessee. Should be a great event. Lots of things good. It's not just a Concours d'Elegance. Beacom Auctions is going to be there. They're going to have the Pace Grand Prix at the Bend. They're going to have all sorts of activities going on. One quick final question, Brian, before we go away. That is, of course, Formula 5000 was so big in the United States. It goes back to England. And tell us about some of your duels that you had with Mario and Al Unser with the Viceroy team, and when you drove Formula 5000 in the mid 70s.
Well, you know, I went through various struggles, including a very bad fire on the Targa Florio in 1970. And at the end of 1970, things were looking pretty bad. But anyway, we got a Formula 5000 car, and in England, we're doing okay with it. And in 1972, we had a Chevron built. Chevron is an English racing car manufacturer, and they were friends of mine, and I'd raced for them for a number of years. And I said to Derek Bennett, the owner, can you build a Formula 5000 car? And he said, yeah. I said, how long and how much? He said, 10 weeks or whatever it cost me. So I paid him, you know, like $5,000 for the car. A friend of mine supplied the engines and gearbox and the mechanics, Sid Taylor. And it was very good. Right off the bat, we won the first two races and set a new record at Oulton Park in the north of England. And Sid says, we're going to America. $20,000 for first place at Watkins Glen in July. So off we go with no money. We bought a second-hand $500 station wagon in New York, and we towed the Chevron on an open trailer to Watkins Glen. We're leading by 40 seconds with 7 laps to go, and $20,000 is flashing, and the battery went flat. But anyway, the end of that year, the last race of the year, Riverside, California, I was tailing Sam Posey, the excellent American driver, in his 30s Formula 5000. At the end of the back straight, there's a very fast bend, turn 9, taken into top gear or maybe in fourth if you wanted to. But I was looking to pass him. So I come up in his slipstream, it's the last lap, and I'm looking to see where he's going, you know, whether he's going to go to the outside or the inside. For turn 9, I'm ready to go to the opposite side. And suddenly the back of his car came at me like this, and I swerved to miss him. I win the race. There's a protest put in. I'd overtaken Sam under a yellow flag. So the chief steward comes to me, and in a strong Lancashire accent, which is where I was from, in Burnley, he says, now then, Brian, lad, I'm Joe Smith from Accrington. Accrington was 7 miles from where I lived. I didn't know him. He said, as one Lancashire lad to another, didst thou see yellow flag or not? I said, no. I said, I didn't. He said, right, lad, you're the winner. So after the race, up to me came this small gentleman and introduced himself as Carl Haas. And Carl Haas was the Lola race car importer for North America. And he said, I'm forming a partnership with Jim Hall of Chaparral Cars next year for Formula 5000. Would you like to drive for us? So that's what started it. So 73, 4, 5 and 6. We won the championship in 74 and 75 with Mario finishing second. And in 76, Alonso was second. And in 73, we would have won the championship, but we missed 2 races. I was driving for Ferrari in Europe, and a young Jody Scheckter, who went on to become world champion for Ferrari, he won 4 races. I won 5, but he won the championship because he'd done more races. So those were, at that time with Jim Hall, the Chaparral, and with Carl and Bernie, Haas were my best days in racing. I had a lot of success in long distance racing all over the world, really. But boy, those 4 years with Jim and Chaparral and you know, Troy Rogers and Han Weiss were just the greatest years.
if you go on YouTube, and I believe that it's video or film, I should say, of you in-car coverage at I believe it's at Targilo Florio, in which you run on a practice day, villagers or whatever are out there with donkey carts and whatnot, and you have to avoid them while you're doing a test run. Do I have that right?
Yes, well, that was in an actual practice car, which in that year, 1971, it was a Porsche 914-6, which really, I didn't think they were as good as the 911, which we'd used the previous year. But in the actual race car, which in both 1970, when Siffert and I won, and in 71, when I had a terrible accident, it was the 9083. And in the race car, the 9083, you only got one practice lap. That was all you got. And that was on the open road with all the traffic, just as it was in that 914-6 in the YouTube video. Yes. So, I mean, it's unbelievable, really, because one lap was 46 miles. There were 750 corners per lap. And it was a 10-lap race. I mean, anyway, it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, if you're able to, make sure you get out to the Chattanooga Motorcar Festival October 15th through the 17th. Lots of stuff to do out there, of course, with racing and auctions. And, of course, Brian Redman will be there. And also, if you're interested in purchasing his book, you can go to gorace.com and click on the store icon and pick up his book, as well as a whole bunch of other things, Brian, you have on here. You got photos on here, you got the book, and of course those Brian Redman stickers, decals.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you for taking time out, and maybe we'll see you in Tennessee in a couple of months.
I sincerely hope so. Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. That's Brian Redman on the Traction Reaction Podcast. We'll talk to you again. Thank you.